Hello, beautiful people. What we have on the agenda today is a bit different from the content I usually put out. Usually, I like to look at and talk about concepts you can use to your advantage in Genshin. Instead, today we'll be applying a few of those concepts to build two solid Abyss teams made up of only 4-star units that can clear floor 12 with 9 stars. The idea behind this is that a lot of people only have 1 or 2 5-star units and they might just be Chi-Chi in her Constellation 1, which honestly can't really carry a team. These teams are, in my opinion, the best way you can allocate your 4-star units to clear the current Abyss 12. They are not teams that will excel against every type of opponent. If you're looking for teams to help you pass other floors of Abyss, you can stay tuned for future videos, but this one may not be for you. In this video, I'll be starting by describing the teams and how they work. Then I'll give a few tips to play these teams as optimally as I know how. After that, I'll include footage of me getting 9 stars on floor 12 and commenting on the enemy-specific strategies. Finally, I'll include a list of things I have that not every player has, and of the limitations I put on myself in order to bring the power level of my units closer to that of the average player. With that said, let's get right into it. When I first started tackling on this challenge, I used a Xiangling carry team with Xiangling, Bennett, Sucrose, and Xingqiu. I found myself having an insanely easy time, because honestly that team is really strong, but using Xiangling, Bennett, and Xingqiu all in one team left very little choice for the second team, so I ended up throwing the idea out. After a lot more consideration and a lot more testing, I settled on the following two teams. A Xiangling Kaeya quick swap team consisting of Xiangling, Kaeya, Bennett, and Diona, and a Beidou carry team consisting of Beidou, Fischl, Xingqiu, and Barbara. Let's start with a Beidou team. This team takes advantage of the fact that there are exactly 2 enemies on both 12-1 and 12-3, which are considered the hardest chambers on floor 12. Beidou is a unit that is generally very underwhelming as a DPS, but when there are exactly 2 enemies, her power skyrockets. Her burst works in a very peculiar way, where it'll bounce a certain amount of times between enemies, 3 times at C0 and 5 times at C2. This means that when there's exactly 2 enemies, the burst will actually bounce between them, hitting the main target 2 times at C0 and 3 times at C2. It also takes advantage of, honestly, a very complicated mechanic called poise, which I don't understand well enough myself to explain clearly. For a more in-depth explanation, you can feel free to go check out the Keqing Main's Theory Crafting Library entry on poise, which I will be linking down in the description. Poise is basically what decides whether or not an enemy gets staggered by an attack. And every attack reduces enemy poise by a certain amount. Both Beidou's burst and her counter reduce poise by honestly a lot. And Electro Charge also contributes to that, meaning that you can actually stagger enemies with huge resistance to interruption, namely Ruin Guards. This means you can actually stop their spin without having to aim at their eye, saving you 10 seconds for every spin cancelled. On top of taking advantage of the fact there are exactly 2 enemies and of the poise mechanic, this team also uses Fischl to provide amazing electroparticle generation for Beidou, and Xingqiu, who is there for his high damage. Barbara's role is to heal and provide the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer buff to either Beidou or Xingqiu depending on the situation. I'll actually be getting into which situations you want to assign the buff to Beidou and which situations you want to assign the buff to Xingqiu while we're watching the actual run. The second team, which is the Xiangling, Bennett, Kaeya, and Diona team, makes use of a concept known as snapshotting. A snapshot is an ability, whether it be a skill or a burst, that lasts for a certain duration and uses the stats of a unit when they cast the ability to determine the damage. This means that if I were to use a snapshot ability in Bennett's burst, the attack bonus would stay throughout the whole duration of this ability. Xiangling and Kaeya both have rotating bursts that happen to fall into the snapshot category, making them work very well with Bennett. On top of that, they both deal an insane amount of damage, but are often dismissed as, just the free-to-play units. Depending on constellation and skill, it's possible to make Xiangling's burst hit anywhere between 7 and 17 times, on top of the initial 3 hits, as far as I'm aware at least. for a total between around 1500 and 3000 of her attack at talent level 6. Kaeya, on the other hand, always hits for around 14 times with his burst for a total of a bit over 1500 of his attack. In comparison, Child's quote-unquote high damage nuke hits for 650, which even when vaped is less than Kaeya's burst. Of course, there's a lot of factors that come into play here, but the point that Kaeya and Xiangling have very strong burst still stands. They are balanced by having somewhat lackluster energy generation. However, running them with Bennett and Diona just fixes those problems, because you can catch Bennett's pyro particles with Xiangling and Diona's cryo particles with Kaeya. On top of that, Bennett's burst gives a huge attack boost, which again ties into the snapshot that we talked about earlier. This team doesn't rely on normal attacks. Instead, while your bursts are on cooldown, you will simply be using your elemental skills to fund Xiangling and Kaeya's burst back up. Now that we know how the teams function, let's get into the actual Abyss runs and see them in action. I won't be using any offensive Abyss cards here, because I want to show that it's doable without them, but obviously you would want to pick ideally crit cards, or attack cards, or honestly just anything that actually helps you. As you can see, I'm waiting for my Serpent Spine to stack up. You can see the 4 stars around me, and as soon as they're done, I can finally start. I target the one in the front, but realistically, if you're having trouble with this chamber, the one in the back is the Electro one, and the Electro one actually hurts a lot more than the Pyro one, simply because of his moveset once he infuses. The Electro Orbs are random and very, very hard to dodge, while the Pyro infusion only gives him a double slam, but it's honestly not that hard to just dodge the slam, so the Pyro infusion is not that big of a deal. Trying to hit both of them at once and not focus only one of them, because I'm trying to get a fast time, but if you're only going for a clear and not a 9-star, you can just focus the Electro one and not care about the Pyro one, and once he's dead you can go and focus the Pyro one. Realize I haven't really talked much about effective ways to use Thrilling Tales here, so ideally you want to use your Thrilling Tales with Barbara whenever you can, and then switch to Beidou when there's 2 enemies, like in this situation, and Xingqiu when there's not 2 enemies, so in future situations, or actually right now. I don't do it because I forget, and I am not perfect. But the idea is, if you're having trouble, you can definitely use your Thrilling Tales in better ways. Xingqiu actually does more single target damage than Beidou when the first one is dead, and there's only the second one that's left. Now let's go see the Xiangling team in action. Unlike the Beidou team, I don't have to wait for Serpent Spine stack, so that's nice. Start with Bennett's burst, then you use Bennett's E, and then immediately cast Xiangling's burst. That way Xiangling is going to catch Bennett's particles after using it. Then you switch to Kaeya, use your E and then your Q, so you can catch the particles after you use your burst. Then Diona, hold your E, catch the particles with Kaeya, and then you swap to Bennett and use your skill, catch the particles with Xiangling. Then switch back to Bennett, use your skill, catch the particle with Xiangling, and over again, until you get all your bursts back and you can simply just start over. Here I should have used my elemental skill before my elemental burst, but I didn't, and it's not the end of the world because, again, I am invested enough where playing perfectly isn't actually necessary for me to 3-star. However, if you want to 3-star, you should definitely try to play perfectly. Okay, I'm just trying to get my bursts back. I don't want to use too many because I want to be able to 3-star the next chamber. However, what you can do is you can simply just... Oh my god, oh right, I almost forgot about that. I get hit quite a bit here, so I end up using Xiangling's burst so I don't die, and I can actually clear it in time. But what you can do is you can simply just use your burst at the end there, and then you'll be able to start chamber 2. You won't actually have your burst on chamber 2, but it's not the end of the world. You only have to just start over. Your 3-stars from 12-1 will still be saved, and you'll be able to take your time on 12-1 and get your burst back up for 12-2. Again, I'm waiting for certain spine stacks, and you want to target the one in the back first, because the one in the back is the cryo one. The Electro one does a lot more damage than the cryo one and is more dangerous. However, the cryo one generates a shield if you don't attack her, which is really, really annoying to deal with when you're trying to get a run as fast as possible. So here, I tried to kill the cryo one first, because it's a bit more dangerous, but it is also faster. Try to use my Viridescent Hunt passive to bring them together so I can AoE them, but the Electro one just teleports away as soon as I do it, and now I've gotten the first one, second one is done, and now is a situation where ideally I will want to switch into Xingqiu from Barbara. Do I do it? I do it, okay. And I want to switch into Xingqiu from Barbara because it actually gives me the Thrilling Tales bonus, which is really useful. One thing to note, Xingqiu's burst is not a snapshot, meaning that you actually don't need to switch from Barbara into Xingqiu before you use the burst. You can switch from Barbara into Xingqiu after you use it. But Beidou is a snapshot, which means that if you want to have your Thrilling Tales bonus on your burst, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to switch from Barbara into Beidou before you use your burst. Here we get a pretty decent first half. If you're really, really struggling with Chamber 2, you can simply switch the teams around. The Team 2 actually does better in the first half. It's just I actually have enough damage on both halves to 3-star it anyways. But if you're having trouble, that is something you can do. Now, I started without my Xiangling burst, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I'm pretty sure I still managed to 3-star this. I mean, if I didn't, it wouldn't be in the video, so. Okay, use my burst, use Kaeya E, use Kaeya Q, switch to Diona, hold the E, switch to Kaeya. I didn't switch to Kaeya. Okay, well, I messed up, but that's okay. Take a bunch of damage there. Gotta make sure I don't die. Also, Diona's burst doesn't do much. Since my Diona's C0, my burst doesn't give me elemental mastery like C6 Diona would. It's just a bigger safety net to make sure I don't die, because you know, when you're trying to record a clip and you keep dying, it's pretty annoying. And I know I already have more than enough damage to 3-star it, and so I don't need to actually play optimally, so I'd rather just have a safety net. Again, here I slow down a little bit, try to get my burst on my relevant units. I don't think I get it on Bennett, but I do get it on Kaeya and Xiangling. And Bennett's burst is the same cost as Kaeya, but you're usually going to build your Bennett with more energy recharge because you don't need as many offensive stats on him. And so because of that, his burst is basically going to be the easiest one to get. And we wait for Serpent Spine again, and here we go. Here, you want to wait in the middle, because if you go towards any of them, the other one is simply going to fire the rockets, and he won't be walking towards you, and it'll take longer. Just use everything. I don't have my Beidou burst, so I don't swap into Barbara at all until I do get it, which I do get it here. So I swap into Barbara, then swap into Beidou, and now she has the Thrilling Tales buff active for her burst. Keep messing with it, guys. And as soon as my Barbara bursts, I remember, yeah, exactly. You guys will be able to see the poise mechanic I was talking about earlier. So you can see the Ruin Guards are like sitting back down every few seconds, and I can actually get them out of the spin. Left Ruin Guard just sat back down. Right Ruin Guard is about to spin. He will start right about now, and I will again be able to get him out of the spin because of Electro Charge plus Beidou. And we just keep doing damage like this. Against those Ruin Guards, you really, really want to always give your Thrilling Tales buff to Beidou, because they're basically gonna die at the same time if you do your things correctly, and so you won't need to swap into Xingqiu for your Thrilling Tales buff. Second team, as you can see, Bennett's burst is much easier to get. Uses E, catch the particle with Xiangling after her burst, drop her E down. So that's a pretty pretty decent way to use it. There we go. Now switch into Bennett, use your E, swap into Xiangling. So swap into Bennett, use your E, swap into Xiangling. You can see her burst is already like 3/4 of the way back there, just because I swapped into the right units at the right times. So swap Bennett, use your E, drop everything. By the way, here my Bennett burst literally just disappeared. I don't know why. I probably could have gotten a faster time if my Bennett burst just didn't disappear. Maybe it was just a visual glitch, but I didn't wanna risk it, and so I held on to my Kaeya and my Xiangling burst until I got the burst back. As you can see here, this is a perfect situation. You want to have both Ruin Guards really close to each other so you can be hitting both at once with Kaeya and Xiangling burst. And here, use Diona burst simply for the comfort to make sure we don't die. And we just keep doing the stuff we were doing earlier. Same principle. Don't need to catch the particles into Xiangling at the end because I know her burst isn't going to get back up in time. But that's basically it. Now that you've seen the comp in action and that you know that it can work, let's get into the things that I have and the average player does not. Have a few constellations on a bunch of my units, and I use 3 Battle Pass weapons. I also have a few gacha exclusive weapons that not every player might have. Let's take a look at what I have and what you can do to achieve similar results without having those. First off, I have a level 60 out of 70 Constellation 6 Beidou with talent levels 4, 6, 9, using a level 90 Refinement 1 Serpent Spine. It's hard to give her enough of a handicap to compensate for her constellations, so I settled for suboptimal artifacts, and I use a 2-piece Gladiator with no other set bonus with a plus 16 Goblet. Even with this handicap, a C0 Beidou would still likely be doing less damage, but I'm okay with that because I had enough time to spare in my runs, especially considering I didn't have to reset too many times to get viable footage, meaning I most likely could have gotten significantly faster times. Other viable weapon options include Blackcliff Slasher, Lithic Blade, or Prototype Archaic. Next up, I have a level 70 out of 80 Constellation 3 Fischl with talent levels 4, 10, and 2, using a level 90 Refinement 2 the Viridescent Hunt. While her Constellation 2 isn't useless, it honestly doesn't deal that much damage, and her C3 only gives her talent levels, which you can realistically get without constellations. You can pretty easily achieve talent level 9 without spending a crown, and you can honestly compensate from the increase from 9 to 10 with slightly better artifacts or just the damage you get from the base levels. Other viable weapon options include Stringless, Blackcliff Warbow, Rust, or Favonius Warbow. I have a level 70 out of 70 Constellation 2 Xingqiu with talent levels 166 using a level 80 Refinement 2 Sacrificial Sword. You can very easily achieve higher damage than my Xingqiu simply by leveling him up and upgrading his talents. However, there's no option that comes really close to how good Sacrificial Sword is, but if you don't have it, you can settle for a Favonius Sword, and if you don't, then you can either go for a Lion's Roar with an Energy Recharge Sense, or simply just a Skyrider Sword. I have a level 50 out of 50 Constellation 6 Barbara with talent levels 2, 5, 5, using a level 50 Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Not much to say about this, honestly. Barbara's only there to be a healer and a Thrilling Tales unit. I have a level 80 out of 90 Constellation 5 Bennett with talent levels 6, 10, 13, using a level 90 Refinement 1 Blackcliff Longsword. This is obviously a huge boost to my team's damage. I recommend anyone who has Bennett to level him up to 80 out of 90 and use a crown on his burst, as it's one of, if not the strongest support ability in the game, and Bennett is insanely versatile. A C0 Bennett with talent level 10 would give 750 attack to his team, while mine gives a little bit over 1000. Bennett, even though he isn't the main DPS, is the reason this team has any cohesion, and is, in my opinion, definitely worth investing into. Other weapon alternatives include Prototype Rancor, and that's basically it. You really want a high base attack weapon. I have a level 80 out of 90 Constellation 3 Kaeya with talent levels 8, 9, 9, using a level 80 Refinement 4 Lion's Roar. The damage I get out of the Refinement on Lion's Roar is very similar to what I'd get out of a level 90 Refinement 1 Lion's Roar, and so you can just assume it's an R1 level 90 Lion's Roar. Kaeya's Constellation 1 isn't very useful here since I barely normally attack with him, and his C2 only triggers when enemies die, which doesn't really happen in floor 12 of Abyss until the chamber is over. His C3 does help, but you could get his kill to level 9 without constellations, and realistically, his kill is not at all the biggest part of the damage in that team, so I probably wouldn't even recommend it. Other 4-star weapon alternatives include Black Sword or Blackcliff Longsword, and you can go for an Iron Sting if you have literally no way to get any of those. I have a level 60 out of 70 Constellation 4 Xiangling with talent levels 2, 3, and 9, using a level 70 Refinement 1 Deathmatch. Xiangling's constellations are so strong that even the level 60 character and level 70 weapon handicap aren't enough to bring her to the power level of your average Constellation 0 Xiangling. However, I'm honestly okay with this for the same reasons as the one I mentioned in the Beidou section. Other viable weapon options include Blackcliff Bowl, or if you don't have it, you can settle for a Dragon's Bane, Favonian's Lance, or a prototype Star Glitter. Generally, Dragon's Bane is very good on Xiangling, however, in this comp, she is not the one triggering the reactions, and so the Elemental Mastery is completely useless. Finally, I have a level 50 out of 60 Constellation 0 Diona with talent levels 1, 4, and 4, using a level 40 Favonius Warbow. I have her on 4-piece Instructor set to slightly boost the damage Kaeya will be doing, since I already heal more than enough with Bennett. But honestly, my Diona is not doing much here. Other viable options include Sacrificial Bow, but I personally believe that the Favonius Warbow is actually better, and it's free to play, so I would highly recommend it. Now obviously, if you were to give all these units as Constellation 0 and only free-to-play non-gacha weapons to a player, they would struggle to clear Abyss 12 with 9 stars. However, while it's pretty unrealistic to assume that every player has every C6 4-star characters, it's also pretty unrealistic to assume that no one has any constellations on their characters. What's actually going to happen is a lot of people are going to have different constellations for different characters and different weapons that they can use. While most of you won't have all the advantages I have, I believe that I've handicapped myself enough that I would expect almost everyone who watches this video and has been playing long enough to be seriously tackling 9 stars on Abyss 12 to at least have a few of them, and even some I don't or have decided not to use. 5-star weapons would obviously be insanely useful, especially on Bennett, Xiangling, Beidou, and Fischl. Fischl's Constellation 6 will help the Beidou team tremendously. All of Xingqiu's constellations over what I have will also be a huge boost to that team's damage. On the Xiangling team, Xiangling C5 and C6 aren't terrible, but they're also not that amazing. Diona's Constellation 6 is a very nice boost to Kaeya's damage. Kaeya's Constellation 5 and 6 are also insane, but most players don't have access to them as he's not included in character banners. Bennett's Constellation 6 is actually pretty good damage bonus in this comp, so rejoice if you've already activated it, but I still can't recommend actually activating it until we get toggleable constellations. Now when it comes to wishing recommendations, the Hu Tao banner has both Xingqiu and Xiangling, so I can't stress enough how much I recommend pulling on it for the 4-star units. Apart from that, both the Wolf's Gravestone and the Staff of Homa help these teams tremendously, respectively for Beidou and Xiangling, so it's definitely worth considering. Finally, I just want to make it clear that the point of this video isn't to flex my ability to clear floor 12 with only 4-star units. The point is to give 2 solid 4-star only base teams that a lot of people will be able to replicate, even if the gacha gods decided to give them Chi-Chi. If you're missing some of these units, or if you have 5-star units you want to play, or even just a mix of both, I'd be happy to give you my opinion on the best way to optimize your teams whenever I'm live at twitch.tv/Jeff77, where I stream every day. Thank you so much to those of you who watch all the way through. My upload schedule is very much non-existent, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's a bad thing in that people who want to see more have very little to work with, but it's also a good thing because I only end up releasing videos I actively want to make, and that I think people would benefit from seeing. If that's the kind of videos you want to see, you can consider subscribing, dropping a like, and most importantly, telling me how your day was in the comments below. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and with that said, farewell, beautiful people.